I'm here with Geoffrey Lipman, Assistant Secretary General of the UN World Tourism Organization. Welcome, Geoffrey.
Thank you, Charlie. Nice to see you again.
Likewise. Tell us, you've spent a day and a half here with global leaders in travel and tourism around the world, the last day and a half. What have you gotten out of it? What stands on top of your mind?
Well, can I say on a personal basis, having been involved for 10 years with the WTTC when it was founded as its first president, how happy I am that the organization is in a really an important position in helping develop world tourism. That was always the objective, and I think this meeting has dealt with the issues. It's had some of the industry leaders here talking about the right issues, and I think the WTTC to some extent has come of age. So from that viewpoint, that's one experience.
Let me then back up. Thank you for that. And first inform our audience that Geoffrey was the founding head, CEO, president of the World Travel and Tourism Council, and saw created and built the foundation to which Jean-Claude Baumgarten, its current leader, has built upon over the last 6 years. And so the maturing process you're talking about is very interesting. To me, focusing on that issue, last year in Washington, D.C., seeing Condoleezza Rice and Michael Chernoff and such high-level decision makers from the U.S. government involved in a gathering with global tourism leaders, I certainly went, whoa, okay. I mean, this is what I've been hearing about. It should be.
Well, that's true, but I don't actually think that was the new part. When WTTC started in 1990, and under the helm, not of me, but of Jim Robinson, then chairman of American Express, those big players who started it, half a dozen big players, Amex, British Airways, Marriott, Bill himself, those kind of players, they had always individually had access at that level. So in the 90s, we had many meetings with heads of state and secretaries of state. What was more interesting was, I think, this year in Portugal, is the messages that we were crafting in those days, which have been amplified and advanced and improved nowadays, they're actually coming from the leaders themselves. Mm-hmm. And that's part of the cyclical development that I see. Big point of satisfaction. Less so when it comes to some of the substantive issues. I'm particularly thinking about the debates that we've had in here on the question of sustainability. And whilst I think WTTC is saying the right things at this moment, there's a difference still between the extent to which you're talking the talk or walking the walk. And I believe that that's the next phase of development, that on the issue of sustainability, which is the primary issue of our time, and it's a quadruple sustainability. We've all been talking about triple bottom line sustainability, social, economic, and environmental, and that's accepted. Now we have climate. It's a fourth peg, and it's a big peg, and it's a highly important peg. And probably we could add a fifth peg, which is the poverty debate. So WTTC is now talking this language. Now the question is, how will it play its part in an ecosystem that the private sector is a part of, but is not the entirety of? In fact, is only one of the major actors. It takes the public sector, it takes the private sector, it takes civil society, it takes this globally, regionally, and nationally to actually move us forward. Meanwhile, in the real goldfish bowl outside of our goldfish bowl, the public and the politicians are onto poverty and they're onto climate change. And the latter one, they're looking at tourism and they're saying, hey, here's an industry which says it's doubling every 10 years. It's invasive. It's got carbon footprints. Is it doing enough for poverty? Is it sustainable over the long term? That debate, which was relatively academic historically, has now become a mainstream debate. We've grown up as an industry and we're a pretty major part of it.
Oh my God. Okay, I don't think we have enough tape for all the questions that
There's a fairly simple logic to it. I mean, I've tried to explain that as I see it, as you asked me. But the fairly simple logic is if you want to stand up as an organization and saying we are representing essentially the private sector, and if there's a big debate going on about your issue and the steps that are needed to bring your issue into mainstream decision-making and action, let's just take the issues of sustainability, poverty and climate change. You have to have some of the solutions and you have to be demonstrating that you yourself are taking those solutions, your members, and you have to be sitting at the table with the other players in the community and saying, this is how we see it. Now, because nobody has a monopoly of truth on this, how do we together find a solution? Which is where we in UNWTO come in as the UN agency dealing with these matters.
That's right. While this is a gathering of the private sector, a lot of the issues and debates that are going on here is we'll have an opportunity to think about it, talk about it, and Travel Mall is going to engage our global online community about some of the issues here. We're going to have the video of this and edit it for consumption by our audience so that it can lead up to the UN's, your organization, UN World Tourism Organization's upcoming conference in Kuala Lumpur. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. We have this year, if I may put it into perspective, we have 3 or 4 major conferences, all of which are going to be dealing with the same issues as have been dealt with here. The first one is coming up on the 4th to the 6th of June in Kuala Lumpur. It's a conference done with the government of Malaysia, and it's very much in celebration of the celebrations that Malaysia themselves are having this year for their own anniversary of their statehood. And its focus will be marketing in tourism, but it will just be a regional conference, mostly for the Asia-Pacific region. It's a world conference, so it's dealing with world issues. We're bringing people into Malaysia with the support of the Malaysia government, and we'll be carry on the discussions, and the main issues are still going to be growth, managing growth, externalities, crises, shock, and the sustainability, poverty dialogue. We'll put this in, and your online community discussion of this will be an important factor, and we'll continue the debate and see if we can find some solutions to some of these issues. Then we'll have another conference in the middle of June at the time of our own Executive Council, which is the governing body, one of the governing bodies of UNWTO, when we're bringing parliamentarians from all around the world who are another set of players, legislators, people who are making the regulations, to Tunis, and we'll have a couple of hundred parliamentarians from all over the world. We'll discuss the same issues. A little bit later in the year, in October, in Davos, together with the World Economic Forum and the United Nations Environment Programme and the federal government of Switzerland, we'll be hosting a major summit on the issue of climate change and tourism. And this follows on from a first gathering of this kind that we held before this became a popular subject in 2003 in Djerba, in Tunisia, where we brought together the actors for the first time. Our Secretary General spotted this evolving situation and said, let's see where the tourism industry is going to, where it's involved, and how it can adapt and how it can mitigate its impact. So we have a Gerba declaration, and in Davos we expect to have maybe 700-800 people from public sector, private sector and civil society debating that issue. Later we'll take those results to a full tourism ministerial in the fringes of World Travel Market in London. We'll take that results of that document to our own assembly in Cartagena, which is a 2-year affair when all of the government's ministers of tourism from around the world come together to establish the policy for the next 2 years and the work program of the organization. So there's quite an iterative process going on here, and this is a timely beginning from the private sector perspective.
The UN World Tourism Organization, UNWTO, is comprised of member countries. How many?
We have 150 governments. We have 350 what we call affiliate members, which is comprised of private sector, academic institutions, and destinations from around the world.
Now, from myself, my own perspective as somebody in the travel tourism industry, I know you hold a lot of conferences, a lot of studies. You bring a lot of issues forward. A lot of it may be for people in the private sector or in the business of promoting or selling travel, a little bit high level. And as you say, you're academic, if that's high level. And of course addresses a lot of the government issues. How, I guess what maybe you can help me with is, so this brings education, awareness to a lot of people in the industry, government leaders. Is that the main objective of UNWTO, or there's something further to that?
The objectives are simple. We want to advance the sound development of the tourism sector in its totality, business, leisure, international, domestic, and we want to do it in a way which is consistent with the Millennium Development Goals, which are the United Nations and the world's agenda for poverty as a primary issue, for health, for gender equality, for better education. So we're the tourism vector into the global agenda, which has been established by the states at the highest level of the United Nations. And if I may add a point, some people again will say, yes, but that's the United Nations. But the truth of the matter is, in a globalizing world, which everybody acknowledges we are in, whether they like it or they don't like it, some issues, big issues, can only be dealt with by international and multilateral bodies like the United Nations. And I'm talking about the impacts of tsunamis which cut across countries, natural disasters, man-made disasters, results of war, humanitarian issues, disease, avian flu. This is the reality of our world, and we have a seat at that table inside the United Nations. Our Secretary General is a member of what in effect is the Board of Directors group of the Secretary General of the United Nations.
Our audience, probably many of them do not know that only in recent past 2 years have the World Tourism Organization have added the formal recognition and being part of the United Nations structure. And all the United Nations organizations related to travel and tourism all of a sudden have been realigned. I presume that process being completed by now to under the UN World Tourism Organization and related initiatives. Let's talk about Bill Gates.
Just before you do, could I just amplify, not correct, because in general terms what you've just described is right. There is a potential for realignment. In fact, what we are now seeing, because we don't force anybody and can't force anybody to come into this new evolved framework that you've described.
I thought it was a directive.
No, not at all. I mean, this is very permissive. Organizations have to work together. Either they logically agree to work together or they don't. And the most important factor for me at this moment is we have an opportunity because we have this structure and this umbrella. UNWTO happens to be placed there, and the challenges that we face at a global level of the kind that I've described, and let's just use climate as one such issue, those challenges are bigger than any single organization that we are. So we have to collect together and work in ways that we've never worked before. And this new situation of the UNWTO not only gives us the opportunity to work together, it gives us the opportunity to vector in to those mainstream decision makings. And to be very specific, on avian flu, for example, which everybody knows is a potentially disastrous situation for the world with potentially millions of human deaths, the UN is working every day on these issues. The World Health Organization is working on preparedness. We in UNWTO, we are a part of that framework. We have a team which is actually developing things and feeding the interests of tourism into that process and feeding the process back to the tourism sector.
Thank you for that amplification. Well, going back to Bill Gates, but I'm going to go backwards a little bit. Bill Gates been involved with UNWTO with some his foundation that you're going to tell us a little bit about to deal with poverty and AIDS in particular. I know that he's been involved with this foundation for that, but I want to go back on this issue of poverty just historically a little bit and talk about STEP, S-T-E-P, and it's the Tourism Organization and World Tourism Organization's initiative of working on a program to reduce poverty around the world, and that program now has grown, and that's where my question is back to the Bill Gates of how all of this is tying together.
Yeah, probably we haven't been clear enough in the way we have explained our the interface with Microsoft Corporation and then our related activity on poverty. So I'll try and make that clear now. First of all, there's a strong separation in Microsoft between the work of the company and the Bill Gates Foundation, which is quite personal and which is dealing with health issues generally and HIV/AIDS specifically. And we are not involved in that. That's a separate activity. Where we are involved is we have signed a public-private partnership with Microsoft itself, and that falls around a topic I know which is very interesting and important to you, which is e-tourism for development. And Microsoft have agreed to work with us as the lead partner in the sector to take a whole series of programs that we've been involved in and activities that they do naturally, that they've been deploying with countries around the world like e-government and e-learning, where they have established programs where they use their software, they make available their systems. They're now turning it to the tourism sector using the programs that we've been developing over time to bring the world, the new e-world that we're all going to live in, into the sector. So if I can be clear, it's with Microsoft, it's mainstream with Microsoft, it's the most important development that UNWTO has undertaken, I believe, in many years, looking to the future of the sector. But it's separate from what Microsoft and from what Bill Gates does and Melissa Gates with their foundation.
I see. And to what scale is there a financial commitment figure and duration?
Yeah, there's no number in there. But I can give you some examples. For example, I mentioned we are doing work on avian flu. One of the central pieces of our work in this area, which we will extend to crises everywhere, is that we have created a one-stop shop portal for people who want to see things about avian flu today and any crises tomorrow. Portal that we call www.sos.travel. We're using the .travel domain for that because we think it sends a very good message to people what this portal is all about. And Microsoft have constructed that portal for us It's up, it's operating, we're extending it, we're looking at components, we're in a real time, in a tsunami. We can even have people who are lost and people who are looking for them hook up through this portal. It's quite robust. It has feeds coming in from Reuters, World Health Organization. It's very visual, something we could never have done ourselves.
It's beyond avian flu. It's disaster
It's
SOS.
It is beyond avian flu, but we are using avian flu as the prototype. Everything's designed around avian flu, and then we'll press a button, and when we are capable of monitoring and responding, or helping the sector respond in the other disasters in the same way as we're geared up for avian flu, then we will move it forward. But in order to build it, we wanted to build it in a very coherent way. We've done that around avian flu. Microsoft simply did that after our request. A second similar issue is we've launched a portal, not launched yet, but in prototype form, called Windows on Africa. Also windowsonafrica.travel, because that sends a message. It will be a mainstream booking portal which will show Africa as a whole, but then integrate all of the web offerings of the member countries of Africa. And because this portal has been designed by Microsoft, it will be as effective and efficient as any portal which is offered by an industrialized country. Now again, Microsoft have paid for the development of all of that. We haven't had to do that. We haven't had to hire developers and programmers and spend money that we don't have. That's how our relationship works with them. And there are many areas. We've probably got 10 areas at the moment that we're looking at, moving people quickly through borders with electronic visas and cards which add to biometric passports. We're examining that kind of thing with Microsoft. Now, we've never done that before in UNWTO, so this relationship is really, really important. And one last point on this, because it is the essence of your question, we are focusing all of that on the developing world. It's going to be available to everybody, but the point is that if the poor countries don't participate in the tourism boom, if the poor countries can't advertise their wares in the right way, if the poor countries, if there's a disaster, can't have an appropriate response mechanism, or the world seeing that they're responding in the right way, or they can't get people easily through their borders, they fall behind. All this work will help to raise their capacity to deliver tourism.
Well, I know that my next question will be a half question, half comment, because due to limited time. But the whole concept of tourism being an effective tool for reducing poverty and certain niche products such as ecotourism being one of the aspects that can achieve that. Is that a proven thing, or is that still conceptual?
No, it's proven now. I think, apart from the fact we have got many studies which demonstrate exactly how and where tourism helps, you would expect us to say that. But I think the World Bank, from some internal studies, have clearly shown there's a very rapid flow-through effect from tourist dollars, or euro, going not just into countries, but wherever they go in the countries. They put the dollars straight down into the community. That's an immediate evidential thing. Secondly, tourism has big links to infrastructure. There's a symbiosis between a state recognizing the need to grow tourism, the need to put infrastructure in place. When it puts infrastructure in place, it helps commerce, it helps raise the standard of living. Telecommunication falls into the same thing. We know the numbers about the interrelationship between the GDP and the jobs, a very high GDP contribution, high jobs numbers. Forget the numbers, with the specifics. It's a big part of any economy.
It's big.
Last point, I'm sorry, Shelley, to do this, but the last point that was mentioned this morning, and we've been heavy on this for a while. If you think of any product which poor countries are producing, they all have something. Somebody has textiles, some have oil, Some have bananas in the Caribbean. But everyone has tourism. It's a universal export commodity for poor countries. And the electronic revolution that you and I believe in is making it easier for them to communicate this fact to a market which is increasingly interested in those kind of products of the ecotourism and is increasingly able to get there because the air services are coming at the right price and in the right place, slowly, but they're coming to let people fly there.
Well, the reason I asked the question about tourism working to reduce poverty is because many of the people I've spoken to in different countries, developing countries, question whether that tourism dollar does reach the poor, that everybody would like to see more of it happening, and/or whether the merchandise products, hard or software variety they're producing, are getting a fair dollar for it out there. And hopefully, I know that this is an evolving issue, and so we will have an opportunity next week at the Global Ecotourism Conference in Oslo, where Travel Mall TV will be. Will you?
I will be in Australia next week, unfortunately, but our people will be there from WTO. But may I just respond to your half question? The answer is not enough gets to where it ought to go to, as it should. Not enough stays in the country rather than leaking back, as it should. And we strongly believe that there's probably three types of sustainability that need to be brought into play more now. Fair trade sustainability. In other words, in general, more of the cake should go to the poor countries, number one. Number two, responsible sustainability. Responsible in the sense that the companies and the travelers themselves have to be sure that they're leaving enough in terms of the export income that they're putting in, and that they're doing it in such a way that it really flows through to the community, and the community has some appreciation of the fact that this is happening, because then you get a balanced relationship between communities, which leads to the last one, which I think is ecosystem sustainability. You have to have the whole ecosystem. The visitors and the visited have to have some sort of harmony in terms of the type of tourism they each want to have. And if you get that right, you help cultural understanding, you get the flows of money going properly. If you get it wrong, you get disruptive tourism, and then communities, and we talked about that in here, communities resist tourism. So you should plan it well in advance. You should put those sustainability factors in at the beginning, not at the end when you see that things aren't working out.
Well, I know that the sponsor of Travel Mall TV for us being here at the WTTC event, Tourism Ventures 21, is a believer that and hopefully will be a catalyst in that those companies will want to leave some more money behind and participate in fair trade, because that will help them make more money.
The whole essence of trade, outside again our environment of tourism here, but if you go to the World Trade Organization, it has to be a two-way flow. The idea is that if you're opening markets progressively, if you're protecting the very weak from the fury of the marketplace, allowing them time to adapt over time, they become a player in the marketplace. In our sector, it's just the same. There are big communities of, as yet, people who are unable to travel, who, if you make a fair trade travel experience, you get two-way travel. Then everybody benefits.
Thank you, Geoffrey, and to our audience. In a few weeks, we'll be continuing this discussion at the UNWTO's hosted conference in Kuala Lumpur, the World Tourism Conference, being hosted by the Malaysia Tourist Office, and in conjunction with Visit Malaysia 2007 celebrations.
Thanks very much, Charlie. It's always a pleasure to see you. Can I congratulate your sponsors on bringing this here and hopefully bringing it to our events? And can I congratulate you on having the foresight to get into this kind of media, which has clearly got to be the norm for our industry in the future? It's a pleasure.
Thank you, Geoffrey. And yes, we will be in Kuala Lumpur and engaging our global community and those who are lucky enough to be able to be in Kuala Lumpur to listen in and feedback on these issues that hopefully will help them in their individual lives and businesses, this lovely travel and tourism business we're in.